Hello, I am Zoe Mayfield. My parents changed the locks on the house I helped maintain for over a decade, then sent me a text telling me I had no home to come back to. No warning, no explanation, just silence and a realtor's sign out front. Turns out, they'd been planning to sell the property behind my back after I paid for the roof, the plumbing, the taxes. But the worst part, it wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing I had been erased from my own family history, quietly, piece by piece. They thought I'd disappear. Instead, I made them kneel. Want to know how? It happened at 8:42 p.m., on one of those early autumn nights when the air feels thin and the world outside seems to exhale. I was sitting on my couch with my laptop open, half watching the evening news, when my phone buzzed. The message came through like any other, short and direct. We changed all the locks. You have no home to return to. For a few seconds, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a scam, maybe a text meant for someone else. Then I saw the name, Mom. I didn't move. The television went on muttering about traffic and local elections while I stared at those words. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I didn't type anything back. My heartbeat wasn't racing. It was steady, deliberate, like I was counting down to something I didn't yet understand. I wasn't crying. I was calculating. The apartment around me was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. My coffee mug sat half empty on the table. Outside, I could hear a car rolling past, its tires whispering against wet pavement. The normal sounds of my small, rented space suddenly felt foreign, like I'd woken up in someone else's life. I set the phone down beside me and rubbed my palms together, grounding myself. I wanted to scream, but what came instead was clarity. If they'd gone so far as to lock me out, it wasn't impulsive. It was planned. The rational part of me took control. I stood, moved toward the desk in the corner, opened my laptop. The light from the screen painted the room pale blue. There was a file labeled Home, Expenses 2020 to 2023. I clicked it open. I needed facts. Emotion would come later. Numbers would save me first. That was how I handled every crisis, order before outrage. Still, behind the calm, there was a tremor. A question pressing in, why now? The answer might have started a week earlier, at lunch with my mother. We met at a small place near Lithia Park, the kind with faded menus and servers who remember everyone's name. She picked it. I'd been nervous, even then, though I couldn't have said why. She wore that soft blue cardigan she liked, pearls around her neck. I remember thinking she looked like someone trying too hard to appear gentle. Zoe, she said, smiling too tightly. You never ask how we're doing anymore. I'd laughed lightly, the way you do when you're unsure if something is an accusation or a joke. You text me every day, Mom. I assume if you were dying, you'd let me know. Her smile didn't move. That's not funny. She picked at her salad, never looking me in the eyes. I remember the pause before she said, You've always been independent. That's good. But sometimes you act like you're separate from us. Like you don't need your family. I'd brushed it off then, told myself she was being dramatic, that she just wanted attention. But now, with that text on my screen, the tone of her voice came back, cool and measured, almost rehearsed. That conversation wasn't about connection. It was a test, and I'd failed it. I shut my eyes and leaned back on the couch, exhaling slowly. I could almost see her, sitting in that same chair at the dining room table where I'd grown up, hands folded neatly, explaining to my father why this was for the best. He'd nod, as always, the silent echo to her authority. A few minutes passed before another sound pulled me out of the fog. My phone buzzed again. A coworker, Darren from accounting, had sent me a link with the message. Thought this looked familiar. I clicked it. Zillow. A property listing. The photos loaded one by one. High resolution. The lighting was perfect, like a lifestyle ad. The kitchen counters gleamed. The maple floors I'd refinished 2 summers ago glowed under morning light. The caption read, Charming 2-story colonial in desirable Ashland neighborhood. Recently updated roof and gutters. The roof. I had paid for that roof. 3 years of weekends spent budgeting, 1 emergency loan. Also the place wouldn't collapse under winter rain. I stared at the image, my hand tightening around the mouse. They hadn't just sold my labor. They were selling my history. Scrolling further, I saw a note in small text, motivated sellers. That phrase stuck in my throat. Motivated. Like this house was a problem they couldn't wait to get rid of. Like I was the problem they couldn't wait to erase. I sat back, blinking hard against the brightness of a screen. My brain started listing facts. Mortgage payments I'd covered, repairs I'd managed, property taxes I'd advanced. None of it mattered legally because I trusted them. There were no contracts, only love and habit. And those don't hold up in court. A slow ache spread through my chest. Not because I'd lost a house, but because I realized how long I'd been invisible in that family. Every effort I'd made, every dollar spent, had been seen as help, not investment. I thought being useful meant being valued. Turns out it meant being taken for granted. The rain outside picked up, tapping against the window like quiet applause for my stupidity. I let it wash through the silence. Maybe they thought I'd crumble, that I'd drive to the house and beg. But they'd mistaken quiet for weakness. They always did. I picked up my phone again. The message still glared at me. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the screenshot tool and captured it. Time, date, everything visible. Then I saved it to a folder named Proof. It wasn't rage that filled me next. It was precision. Every betrayal leaves a pattern, and I intended to map it. They thought they'd locked me out. They were wrong. The house was brick and paint, but home was information, and that was mine to keep. I turned off the lights, letting the glow of the screen fade. The text burned behind my eyelids as I lay back on the couch. Tomorrow, I'd start gathering everything they'd ever asked me to do as a favor. Tomorrow, I'd trace every check, every message, every receipt. They think I'll just disappear. But I'm going to make sure they remember who they locked out. You'd think it started with that message. It didn't. It started long before, with a silence that had my name cut out of it. I didn't sleep much after that night. The sky outside turned from indigo to gray, and by the time light seeped through my blinds, my body felt like it had been holding its breath for hours. I made coffee but didn't drink it. I just watched the steam rise and fade. Every sound in the apartment, the refrigerator, the heating pipes, felt louder than usual, like the room was trying to remind me that I still existed somewhere. At 9:30, a knock came at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, a delivery guy stood there holding a cardboard box with my name scribbled on top in a hand I knew too well. From Ashland, he said, glancing down at the return label. I didn't need to read it. My mother's handwriting had a way of looking delicate even when it delivered destruction. The box wasn't heavy. Inside, I found a few shirts, an old sweater, a mug that said, "World's Okayest Daughter," and a handful of things that smelled faintly like the house, lemon cleaner, cedar, and something old I couldn't name. Near the bottom was a photo in a cracked frame. It took a second to realize what I was seeing. There we were. My parents, my sister, the front porch I'd painted myself, and a jagged space where my face had been cut clean out. It wasn't clumsy or emotional. The edges were straight, deliberate. It looked surgical. I set the photo on the counter, feeling my pulse slow. The apartment felt colder now. They hadn't just sent my belongings. They'd mailed proof that I'd been erased. I caught myself whispering, like I was a stain they needed to scrub off the family frame. For a long minute, I stood still. Then I reached for my phone, thumb hovering over my mother's contact name. I didn't call. What could I say? Why? She'd tell me not to be dramatic. How could you? She'd say, "You've always been too sensitive." So instead, I opened my laptop. If they wanted to make me invisible, I'd document every step they took to do it. I typed Jackson County Property Records into the search bar, found the county clerk's office number, and dialed. A woman's voice answered, cheerful but detached. "Recorder's Division, how can I help you?" "I'm calling to verify some property information," I said. "Address on Ashland Street, under the names Vera and Calder Mayfield." There was the sound of typing. "And your name, ma'am?" "Zoe." "Their daughter. Are you listed on the property?" I hesitated. I should be, at least as a secondary occupant. I lived there until recently. More typing. Then a pause. "I'm not seeing your name associated with the property, ma'am. It appears the documents were updated last spring." My mouth went dry. Updated how? The occupancy list was modified, marked, temporary resident, no ownership claim. That's what the filing says. By whom? Filed by primary owners, Vera and called her Mayfield. I swallowed, keeping my voice even. Is that legal? It's common for family homes, she said, too casually. Nothing illegal about it. When I hung up, I stared at the screen, trying to process what I just learned. They'd planned this for months, maybe years. Every word my mother had said about preparing for the future now sounded like code for something else. They didn't act in anger. They'd been editing me out piece by piece. I leaned back and rubbed my temples, the call echoing in my mind. A breeze slipped through the window, carrying the smell of rain. My thoughts spiraled back 2 years, to a birthday dinner at Bryn's new house, the one Mom helped her buy. That night had felt strange even then. Everyone was smiling too much. The dining table gleamed under the chandelier, the kind of perfection that doesn't allow crumbs. I'd arrived late from work, still in my suit. Mom had greeted me with a hug that lasted half a second. We already took the family picture, she'd said. But don't worry, we'll get one with you later. We never did. I remembered how she and Bryn laughed about it later, posting the photo online. Family dinner, love these people. People commented about how beautiful the Mayfields looked. No one noticed a space at the end of the table that could have fit one more chair. I used to tell myself it didn't matter. That love isn't measured in pictures. But standing in my kitchen now, holding a photo with my face cut out, it all connected. It wasn't passive. It was strategy. I placed the frame on the counter and stared at it, thinking how familiar this felt. The quiet removal, the rewriting of family memory. The rain outside turned steady, tapping against the window like someone knocking from the other side. For a moment, I thought about gluing the photo back together, just to see what it looked like whole again. But no, some things aren't meant to be repaired. Instead, I set the photo down, turned on my laptop, and placed it on the scanner bed. The image appeared on the screen, fractured but preserved. I saved the file under a new name, Exhibit 1. Grief didn't vanish, but it shifted shape, from ache to focus. My sadness had somewhere to go now. I opened a new folder and started a document titled Records to Obtain. The list grew quickly. Bank statements, emails, text threads, work invoices, payment receipts, old tax filings. Proof. When I was younger, my mother used to say, "Family is about trust, not paperwork." I believed her. Now I understood that paperwork was exactly what she used to build a world where only her truth existed. A noise from the hallway pulled me back, the sound of the mail slot clinking. I went to check, expecting junk mail. Instead, an envelope with the county's seal lay on the floor. Inside were certified copies of property documents I'd requested months ago for tax purposes. I hadn't opened them then. I spread them on the kitchen table. There it was, in black ink, primary occupants, Vera and Bryn Mayfield. Bryn, my sister. I read the line again, and again until the words blurred. So this was their plan, pass the house to Bryn under the pretense of convenience, leaving me out cleanly, legally. No mess. No guilt. A laugh escaped me, low and humorless. They changed the locks, changed the story, changed the records. But I wasn't gone. I was right here, reading their signatures. I reached for my pen and circled the line. The ink bled slightly into the paper, dark and final. They changed the locks. They changed the records. Now I'll change the ending. The words weren't a threat. They were a promise to myself. The first lie wasn't the locks. It was the contract I signed when I thought I was helping my mother recover. 2 days had passed since the box arrived. Rain slid down my windows in soft, steady ribbons, the kind that make you lose track of time. I had been sorting through old emails, copying messages into a folder named Evidence, when the memory came back to me, that afternoon 6 months ago when Mom had called from the hospital. She'd sounded weak on the phone, breathy and dramatic. "Zoe, I hate to bother you, honey, but I need a favor. Just a few papers for insurance and medical authorization. Nothing serious, I promise." I'd left work early, caught the last bus to Rogue Valley Medical Center, and arrived to find her sitting upright, perfectly alert, wearing lipstick and a pale pink robe. My father, Calder, stood at the window, his hands tucked behind his back like he was a visitor in someone else's life. "You look good," I said cautiously, setting my bag down. "I'm fine now," she sighed, giving a small, brave smile. "The doctor says it was just a little scare. But these hospitals, They want so much paperwork. I swear it's endless. She reached for a manila folder on the bedside table and handed it to me. Would you mind signing these for me? It's just authorization for you to speak with the doctors if anything happens again. You're so organized. I knew you'd take care of it. Her tone was sugar wrapped around steel. When my mother asked for something that way, you didn't say no. I flipped through the pages. The first few looked like medical releases, some printed letterhead from the hospital, others typed on plain paper. One page mentioned power of attorney, which gave me pause. This seems more like legal stuff than medical, Mom. She waved her hand lightly, the four-tube shifting. It's just to make sure there's no confusion if I'm ever incapacitated. We've already signed everything else for Bryn. This is just for you, so we're covered on both sides. Calder turned from the window and added, It's all standard, Zoe. We just need to get the hospital off our backs. I remember taking a breath and signing where the sticky notes were marked. My handwriting looked hesitant even then. I hadn't read half the text, but they looked so calm, like this was all normal routine. Afterward, Mom squeezed my hand, smiling. You've always been my responsible one. Now, half a year later, sitting alone with rain tapping the glass, those words tasted like poison. I went to the kitchen, poured myself some water, and stared at the countertop. A line of receipts was spread out beside my laptop. Somewhere in that mess of paper, the truth was hiding. I grabbed my phone and called Lindsay, a friend from college who worked as a paralegal. She answered on the second ring. Hey stranger, long time. What's up? Do you have a minute? My voice came out sharper than I intended. I need you to look at something for me. A few forms my mom had me sign last spring. She said they were hospital documents, but I don't know. Something feels off. Send them over. I'll glance at them. I dug through the folders on my desk, found the crumpled copies from the hospital visit, and scanned them. My hands were shaking, just enough to blur the image. After I hit send, I forced myself to breathe, pacing the small space between my sofa and kitchen counter. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Lindsay's voice had lost its usual warmth. Zoe, where did you get these? I told you, from my mom's hospital stay. Why? Because you didn't just sign hospital forms, she said slowly. You signed a quitclaim waiver. It's a property release. It removes your name from any shared asset claims. It even includes language about voluntary relinquishment in the event of sale. I sank into the nearest chair. That can't be right. I don't even own the property. You did, she corrected. At least informally. You transferred funds. You made mortgage payments. This document basically ensures that any claim you could make, even as a contributor, is void. It's notarized, too. My mouth went dry. By who? The witness signature says Cynthia Meadows. Ring any bells? It did. Cynthia was Mom's old friend, the one who always bragged about her notary business. I could still picture her with her gold pen and 2 red lipstick, hovering over family documents like a vulture. Lindsay continued, Zoe, I'm sorry, but this is bad. It's not technically illegal if you signed it willingly, but it's deceptive. You'll have a hard time proving coercion unless there's something in writing. I thanked her and ended the call, staring at the phone as if it might apologize for her. I remember that day again, Mom's soft tone, the way she brushed my hair behind my ear after I signed. You're a good daughter, she'd said. You don't make things complicated like your sister. I hadn't known I was signing away part of my life. A wave of nausea hit me. I pressed my hands to my stomach, pacing to the window. Outside, the rain had turned heavier, thick drops pounding the glass. It was as if the sky knew what I just learned. They didn't just write me out. They forged my loyalty into an exit. I opened my laptop again and scrolled through my messages with her, rereading months of conversations. So many casual requests. Can you cover the tax bill this month? Can you deposit the check while we're out of town? Each one suddenly looked like a brick in the wall they'd built around me. I began organizing everything, emails, receipts, texts, into labeled folders. My work brain took over. It was the same part of me that could untangle a budget crisis or spot an error in a spreadsheet from across the room. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was an auditor, and my family was the case file. As hours passed, the rhythm of it steadied me. Click, drag, save. Click, rename, print. Facts don't lie. They don't twist or sigh, or say things like it's for your own good. They sit quietly and wait to be read. I called legal aid next, speaking to a woman who sounded exhausted but kind. She listened carefully and said, "We can review this for possible misrepresentation. It'll take time, but don't sign anything else. Keep copies of everything." "I already started," I told her. When the call ended, I looked at the folder on my desktop. Evidence said A. For the first time in days, I felt something close to peace. It wasn't happiness, it was direction. My mother always believed silence was power. She used it like a tool, a way to make others fill the space with apologies. But I'd learned that silence can be sharper when it's deliberate, when it's preparation. As the rain began to taper off, I opened a notebook and began writing a new timeline, dates, events, documents. I underlined the first entry, hospital visit, 6 months ago. Beneath it I wrote, contract signed under false pretense. At the top of the page, in careful block letters, I wrote the sentence that summed it all up. They forged my loyalty into a contract. I'll convert it into evidence. I closed the notebook and turned off the lamp. Outside, the world was dark, but inside, the path forward was painfully clear. But evidence means nothing when the enemy looks like your sister, and she's smiling like she won something. 3 days had gone by since I started sorting through the files. I'd spent nights in my apartment surrounded by papers and flash drives, the glow of my laptop turning my living room into a small war room. I hadn't planned to see my family again so soon, but that Thursday Bryn called. Her voice was as warm and sugary as the frosting on one of her social media cakes. "Hey, Joe. Mom wants us all to have dinner Saturday. Just family. We thought it'd be good to talk things through." "Talk things through," I repeated, like the words were a foreign phrase I had to translate. "At your place?" "Yeah. 7 o'clock. Dress nice. I'm having a photographer drop by for a few promo shots before dessert." Of course she was. I could have said no. I wanted to, but something in me needed to look them in the eye to see if guilt looked any different up close. So I said yes. Saturday came gray and heavy with drizzle, the kind of day where everything smells like wet pavement. I spent the afternoon pretending to work, but mostly rehearsing what I'd say if the topic of the house came up. I didn't want a scene. I wanted confirmation. Proof. When I pulled up to Bryn's house, the lights from inside spilled through the windows, golden and warm, like a magazine spread. I could already picture the caption she'd post later. Family dinner. Grateful for love and second chances. The front door opened before I reached it. Bryn stood there, perfect as ever, loose curls, cream blouse, wine glass in hand. "You made it," she said, like I'd shown up for a reunion instead of an ambush. The house smelled of rosemary chicken and expensive candles. I wiped my shoes on the mat and followed her inside. Mom and Dad were in the dining room, seated side by side, a united front. Bryn's husband flitted between the kitchen and living area, laughing too loud. "Zoe," Mom greeted me, her tone as polite as a hostess welcoming a stranger. "We're so glad you came. It's been too long." 2 weeks, I said. "Feels longer, I guess." She didn't respond. The table was set for 6, though we were only 5. Silver napkin rings, polished flatware, crystal glasses that looked borrowed from a catalog. I'd grown up eating spaghetti off chipped plates, but Bryn's world was curated down to the salt shakers. We sat. Conversation fluttered. Weather, new restaurants, Bryn's upcoming brand collaboration. I let them talk, sipping my water, nodding in the right places. My father asked if my job was keeping me busy. Bryn chimed in. "You work so much, Zoe. You should really take a break and come up to Portland sometime." "Maybe after my house sells," I said, watching her reaction carefully. Her eyes flickered, then softened into a smug kind of sympathy. "Oh, Mom's going to help me with the down payment once the house sells." Finally putting it to good use. It was casual, effortless, a slip of the tongue polished by years of privilege, but the air in the room shifted like someone had opened a freezer door. Dad coughed into his napkin. Mom's hand froze on her glass, and for a split second, our eyes met. Her pupils widened, but she recovered fast, lifting the glass to her lips. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. Bryn noticed. "What? Did I say something wrong?" Mom cut in quickly. No, dear, it's fine. Zoe understands the arrangements. The word arrangements landed like a slap. I took a slow breath. Oh, Ido. My voice was even, too even. Bryn laughed lightly, unaware or pretending to be. You know me. I never could handle the maintenance of that big old house. But once it's gone, maybe we can all finally relax. I wanted to ask if she'd ever thought about who made that house livable, the weekends I'd spent repainting the porch, replacing shingles, unclogging gutters while she posed for her perfect life online. Instead, I just nodded. Relaxing sounds great. Dinner carried on like nothing happened. Bryn's husband poured more wine. Mom complimented the meal. Dad told a story that went nowhere. I smiled when expected, though my jaw ached from holding it. Halfway through dessert, I excused myself to the bathroom. I leaned against the counter and stared at my reflection under Bryn's soft vanity lighting. My face looked calm, almost bored. Inside, I was taking inventory. Every word, every pause, every flicker of guilt I'd seen. They weren't just selling the house. They were rewriting the family story. And Bryn was the new lead. I returned to the table just as Mom was saying, "It's all about keeping peace in the family. That's what matters most." I slipped into my chair. "Peace isn't the same as pretending, Mom." She gave a tight smile. "Always dramatic, Zoe." There it was, her favorite dismissal. I felt something harden in me, but I kept my tone polite. Maybe. But sometimes drama's just the truth that no one else wants to say out loud. The plates clinked. Dad cleared his throat. Bryn poured herself more wine, pretending to scroll through her phone. When dinner ended, Bryn hugged me at the door. "I'm glad you came," she said. "See, we can still be a family." I returned the hug stiffly. "Sure," I said. "Families always find ways to stay connected. Some of us just record the conversations." Her smile faltered. "Excuse me." "Nothing," I said, stepping back into the drizzle. I walked to my car, the night air cool on my face, and sat there for a long time before starting the engine. The smell of wet leaves filled the air. I took out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and replayed what I'd captured during dinner. Bryn's voice came through, clear as crystal. "Mom's gonna help me with the down payment once the house sells." Finally putting it to good use. There it was, the confession they didn't even realize was evidence. I let the recording play again, quieter this time, until her laughter at the end faded into static. "Let's see if the court thinks I'm still being dramatic," I whispered. Then I put the car in drive, the sound of rain blending with the soft hum of the tires, and pulled away from the perfect little house on the perfect little street, ready for whatever came next. She said it with a smirk, but I said it with documents, and some truths are louder on paper. A week had passed since that dinner. The recording of Bryn's voice had become a kind of anthem in my head, a loop I played every night to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts had been right all along. Each time I heard her say those words, "Mom's gonna help me with the down payment once the house sells," my spine straightened a little more. That sentence was my proof, my turning point. The following Monday morning, an email from my mother arrived with a subject line that read, "Family Conference. Let's clear the air." It wasn't a question, it was a summons. The message was short, formal, even cheerful in tone. "Let's get on the same page, darling. 7 p.m. Wednesday. Zoom link attached. Love, Mom." I stared at it for a long minute before responding with a single word, confirmed. Wednesday came with the kind of still air that feels like a warning. By evening, I was at my kitchen table with my laptop open, phone recording app running beside it, a glass of water, a notebook, and the legal pad where I'd been documenting everything, all laid out like weapons in plain sight. The screen flickered to life, and there they were. My mother, sitting at her dining table with the good china in the background. My father, off to the side, eyes downcast, already halfway invisible. And Bryn, perched like a porcelain doll, smiling too hard, her face glowing under ring light perfection. "Zoe," Mom's voice rang out as though we were old friends reconnecting. "It's so good to see your face. You look tired. Work too much as usual." "I'm fine," I said evenly. "Let's get to it." A flicker of annoyance crossed her features before she smoothed it away. "Of course. I just wanted us to talk openly like a family. No tension. No lodgers." Then stop sending me documents that require one. Bryn's laugh filled the silence, light and awkward. Come on, Zoe, don't make this harder than it has to be. Mom cut in gently. Honey, no one's making anything hard. We just need to understand each other. You've always been so independent. That's what we love about you. We didn't want to weigh you down with all this property nonsense. All this property nonsense, I repeated softly, my pen gliding across the page to note the phrase. She continued, her voice dripping with reason. Everything you did for the house, it came from love, didn't it? You helped because you wanted to, not because you expected anything back. That's how you saw it, I said. She smiled, leaning closer to the camera. Well, of course. That's how families work. We give from the heart. And gifts, Zoe, gifts don't come with strings. There it was, the rewrite. My jaw clenched. In her world, every act of loyalty became charity the moment it suited her. Bryn chimed in sweetly. You've always been the generous one, Zoe. That's why Mom trusts you so much. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but my voice stayed steady. So help becomes erasure. Loyalty becomes leverage. Mom blinked. What was that? Nothing, I said, forcing a smile. Just taking notes. The call stretched on for nearly an hour. Mom spoke in circles. Words like understanding, harmony, family first floating around like perfume to mask the rot underneath. Dad said nothing until the very end, when he sighed. Let's not drag this out, girls. It's just a house. Yeah, I said quietly. Just a house. When I finally clicked leave meeting, the silence of my apartment felt electric. I sat there, breathing slowly, trying to keep the anger from boiling over. The screen still reflected my face, faintly distorted, like I was watching someone else's life. I opened my notebook and began to write. They rewrote the story. Again. The words steadied me. I closed the laptop and stood, walking toward the small window above the sink. The city outside glowed faintly under streetlights. Somewhere, a siren wailed, distant and lonely. And then the memories began to line up in my mind, like dominoes finally tipping. Mom calling on a Saturday morning. The roof's leaking, sweetheart, can you handle it? Your father's back is acting up. Me, climbing the ladder, hammer in hand, the sun burning the back of my neck while Bryn posted pictures from her spa day. The electric bill that must have gotten lost in the mail, the tax notice she sent me with a note saying, if you could just cover this one. The day she bragged about Bryn's birthday trip to Cabo, the family fund covered it, of course. We're all family. Each memory carried the same aftertaste, obligation dressed as affection. I sat down again, my hands trembling just slightly. You've always been independent, she'd said. That was her way of saying, you were useful. The anger that followed wasn't hot, it was cold, precise. I opened my laptop again, opened my notes, and began building my case the way I built financial audits at work, systematically with proof. Every file had a label. Every label had a date and a category. Labor unpaid, roof repair receipts, paint purchases, direct financial contributions, mortgage transfers, utilities, emotional coercion evidence, text strings and phone logs where she said things like, you're our rock, Zoe. You always fix things. I created folders inside folders, property, transactions, manipulation, recordings. I uploaded the audio from the dinner, the video call, everything. My apartment hummed with the low sound of the computer fan and my own quiet breathing. Hours passed. Outside, the rain returned, faint at first, then steady, tapping the glass like someone reminding me to keep going. By midnight, I'd filled an entire flash drive. I slid it into a small safe box under the couch, my version of a vault. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd saved but never used. Hollis March, attorney at law. He answered on the second ring. Zoe, I was wondering when you'd call. You remember my family situation? I remember enough to know you should have called sooner. I'm ready to move forward, I said. He was quiet for a second, then replied, Good. That's the first honest sentence you've said about them. After we hung up, I sat in the stillness. The air smelled like metal and rain. My heart didn't pound anymore. It pulsed with calm, like something long dormant had finally found its rhythm. I closed the laptop, the screen fading to black, and whispered into the quiet, No more warnings. No more waiting. They should have stopped at silence. Instead, they sent a party invite with my name spelled wrong. 2 weeks passed. The days blurred together in the steady rhythm of work, case building, and the slow tightening of control. Every email to my lawyer, every new document saved, was another brick in the wall I was building between myself and them. Then, on a Friday morning, the mail slot clattered and a single cream envelope slid onto my rug. It was thick, heavy paper, the kind used for weddings or graduations. My name, or some version of it, was printed in embossed gold lettering, Miss Zoe Mayfield. Zoe, with a Y. I held it for a moment, my thumb pressing into the corner. That small, unnecessary letter said everything. I wasn't even worth spelling right. I slit the envelope open. Inside was an invitation bordered in gold foil. You are cordially invited to the 40th anniversary garden celebration of Vera and Calder Mayfield. Below that, a list of invitees. It was almost comical. Influencers, church acquaintances, neighbors with more money than warmth. Not one person from my side of life, not a coworker, not a friend. The RSVP deadline had already passed 2 days earlier. It wasn't an oversight. It was a statement. I sat down, flipping the card over in my hands. No return address. Of course not. This wasn't about me attending. It was about me knowing I wasn't really invited. By mid-afternoon, I was still holding the invitation. The rain outside had cleared, leaving the sky washed and sharp. My phone buzzed. It was a group message from Bryn. Can't wait to see everyone tomorrow. Family is everything, 2 hearts. Family. That word again. They used it like perfume, to cover the smell of rot. I decided to go. Not because I wanted to celebrate, but because sometimes you have to stand in the room where people are rewriting your story. The next day I dressed simply, black slacks, white blouse, hair tied back. The drive across town took 20 minutes, but it felt longer. By the time I reached their house, cars already lined the street. Balloons and white tents filled the front yard. It looked like a catalog photo, the kind that tries too hard to look effortless. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance, heels crunching on the gravel. The sound reminded me of how I used to mow the same lawn as a teenager while Bryn supervised. When I stepped through the gate, the noise of laughter hit me first. Too loud, too polished. Tables were covered in linen. Wine glasses glittered in the sun. There were photographers, waitstaff, even a small stage near the rose bushes. Mom spotted me first. Her expression froze for a fraction of a second before she put on her public smile. Oh, you actually came. That tone. The one that says you weren't supposed to. Couldn't miss such a milestone, I said lightly. After all, 40 years is a long time to keep a story straight. Her eyes narrowed, but the guests nearby were watching, so she chuckled. Always with the wit, Zoe. She emphasized my name, the correct spelling, but the slip had already been made. Inside, the living room gleamed like a museum. I'd come early on purpose, before the crowd thickened, and took my time walking through. The air smelled of flowers and floor polish. On the wall above the mantel hung an enormous framed portrait of Bryn in her wedding dress, center, glowing, larger than life. The space where my graduation photo had hung for years was bare. I found it on the side table in the hallway, still in its frame but turned face down. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, taking it in. They hadn't needed to throw me out again. They'd erased me with interior design. From the patio, I could hear Bryn's voice drifting in. Everyone's here to celebrate love and legacy. Legacy. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. The crowd gathered under the tent, the air filled with clinking glasses and small talk. I moved through them like a ghost. People smiled politely. A few asked who I was. One woman leaned in and whispered, "You must be a co-worker of Bryn's." I smiled back. Something like that. Then Bryn took the microphone. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our wonderful parents. Family is everything. It's where we learn loyalty, forgiveness, love." I couldn't help it. I laughed once, quietly, and people turned. The sound didn't fit the setting. Bryn paused, then recovered with a smile. "And sometimes," she continued, "it's where we learn to rise above differences." My mother beamed. My father raised his glass. The performance was flawless. When Bryn finished, Applause rippled through the tent. I joined in, one slow clap, deliberate, the sound cutting through the noise. Bryn's smile faltered. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then I set my glass down and walked out. No one tried to stop me. The afternoon sun had dipped behind the trees, throwing long shadows across the lawn. I didn't look back as I left. I'd gotten what I came for, the proof that my absence was part of their design. By the time I reached my car, the sky had gone from gold to gray. I sat behind the wheel for a moment, breathing. The quiet felt heavier than the party noise I'd escaped. I took out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and tapped Hollis March's number. He answered quickly. Zoe. Yes. Did something happen? Not something, I said. Everything. I told him about the invitation, the misspelling, the photos, the party. Every small cruelty added up to something undeniable. He listened. When I finished, he said, "Then it's time to file. We have enough." Back at my apartment that night, I worked in near silence. My laptop hummed as I uploaded photos from my phone, the missing portrait, the invitation, even a snapshot of my mother's expression when she'd seen me arrive. Each one labeled, dated, categorized. At 8:30, Hollis sent me a draft of the legal filing. I read it twice. It was clinical, factual, and devastating. It didn't scream revenge, it stated reality. I added my evidence, proof of financial contributions, maintenance receipts, and digital timestamps of messages where my mother called my payments help. I hit send. By 9 o'clock, the court system confirmed the case number. I stared at it on the screen, that string of numbers and letters that meant something irreversible had begun. I closed the laptop, picked up my journal, and wrote one line across the page. They misspelled my name. Now I'm rewriting theirs, on the legal record. And when you fight back, the first thing they do is try to break what they think you love most. 3 days after filing the claim, I woke up to an email that made no sense. It was from a leasing office downtown, the new apartment I'd applied for, the one with sunlight and an actual dishwasher. Application denied. Credit report below minimum threshold. I frowned, reread the message, then opened the attachment. My score had dropped more than 200 points since last month. That wasn't possible. I paid everything on time, lived modestly, had no debts except my car loan. Something was wrong. I logged into my credit report, expecting maybe an error, a single late payment I'd missed. What I found was chaos. 5 new accounts, credit cards, retail lines, even a small business loan. All opened in the last 8 months. All tied to my old address. My heart didn't pound this time, it just sank. I clicked through the details. Purchases from hardware stores, furniture outlets, a cruise line. Tens of thousands in balances. Then the worst part, the billing name. Zoe Mayfield. My name, my social security number, my burden. It took half an hour for the truth to settle. It wasn't a stranger. It was them. Who else had access to my information? Who else could have done it so seamlessly? By late morning, I was pacing my apartment, clutching my phone like it was both weapon and lifeline. The walls felt closer. The air felt heavy. I dialed my mother. She answered on the second ring, her tone cheerful. One. Everything okay? Did you open credit cards in my name? There was a pause, sharp, short, telling. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I pulled my report. I saw the addresses. You used my social security number. Another pause, then a sigh that sounded almost annoyed. We raised you. We fed you. We deserve something back. You wouldn't even have that number if it weren't for us. I closed my eyes. That's not how this works. You think suing us for a house makes you righteous, she snapped now, the warmth gone. You've taken enough. This family owes you nothing. We built you, Zoe. Every bit of stability you have came from us. Except the credit score, I said quietly. Her voice hardened. You should have kept quiet. This is what happens when you push your family. I hung up before she could finish. The silence after was thick, almost physical. I set the phone down and stared out the window. The world outside looked ordinary. Kids biking down the street, a dog barking somewhere, but something inside me had snapped clean. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done being surprised. The next blow came 2 days later, not from a call, but from the internet. I was drinking coffee, scrolling news, when a video popped up in my feed. Bryn's face, perfectly lit, mascara slightly smudged for sympathy. The caption read, "Family shouldn't hurt family." I clicked it, though I already knew what I'd find. Her voice trembled, just enough to sound real. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to talk about this publicly, but my sister, she's suing our parents. I don't even recognize her anymore. She's become so angry, so vindictive. She dabbed her eyes, letting the camera linger on her tears. All we ever did was love her. I laughed out loud, not bitterly, almost in disbelief. The comments section filled instantly. Supportive messages, sympathy, people calling her brave. Stay strong, Bryn. Family comes first. You don't owe anyone toxic energy. I closed my eyes, leaned back in the chair, and felt the slow, familiar burn in my chest. They were good at this, controlling the story. It was their art form. But the internet, for all its cruelty, has one redeeming quality: it never forgets. The next morning, I woke to chaos. My phone buzzed with notifications. Someone had posted an old video clip from the garden party, Bryn's voice, champagne glass in hand, saying brightly, "Once the house sells, I'm flying to Italy." That's what this was always for. The comment section flipped in hours. The same people who'd called her brave were now calling her greedy. Someone even tagged me. So this is the sister she's been talking about? The one who paid for everything. Bryn turned off comments by noon, but it was too late. Screenshots were everywhere. Local gossip blogs picked it up. The same social media that had once worshipped her now dissected her like a scandal. I didn't post anything. I didn't have to. I'd learned long ago that silence, used right, is louder than shouting. Instead, I opened my laptop. I gathered the evidence, screenshots of my mother's text messages asking for temporary help, the fraudulent credit accounts, the phone log from that morning. I zipped it all into a folder titled Case Expansion. Then I emailed Hollis. Subject: additional evidence. He called an hour later. "You weren't kidding about family dysfunction. I'm adding a second complaint," I told him. "Identity theft." "You sure you want to go that route? That's criminal, Zoe." "They made it criminal. I'm just calling it by name." He was quiet for a second. "Then we'll make sure they understand what that means." That afternoon, I also filed a report with the Federal Trade Commission. The form asked how much I'd lost. I wrote, "Money can be replaced. Trust can't." Then I hit submit. Evening crept in. The sky outside was the color of smoke. My laptop pinged with an email from Hollis. Case review approved. Mediation begins in 10 days. 10 days. I sat back and exhaled. 10 days until everything came into the light. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Mom, her tone icy. "I hope you're happy, Zoe. You've humiliated this family." Maybe I had. Or maybe I'd finally stopped letting them humiliate me quietly. I walked to the window and watched the streetlights flicker on, one by one. The reflection in the glass looked older somehow. Not tired, just settled. They wanted me erased. I just made myself undeniable. The courtroom smelled like lemon disinfectant and nerves. I brought truth in a manila folder. I arrived 10 minutes early. Always do. It's a habit from years of being the only one who cared if things started on time, the only one who didn't treat responsibility like a burden but like breathing. Hollis was already there, seated calmly, reading through his notes with the kind of quiet intensity I'd come to admire. "Zoe," he said without looking up, "we're going to be fine today." "Not we," I corrected softly, sliding into the seat next to him. "Just me." He smiled faintly, eyes still on the documents. "Fair enough." The room was small, not a courtroom exactly, more like a private conference suite in a downtown law office. 2 long tables facing each other. White walls, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sickly. 1 window, blinds drawn. A pitcher of water sat on a side table untouched. Across from us, they walked in together. Vera first, her heels tapping sharp and fast. Calder followed behind like a man on his way to his own sentencing. Bryn brought up the rear, phone in hand, fingers twitching over the screen, even though she wasn't typing anything. I didn't stand, didn't greet them, just looked. That was enough. Vera met my eyes, her smile small and icy. "Zoe, I see you dressed for a funeral. I didn't answer. Bryn whispered something to Calder, who just nodded with a blank face. He hadn't looked me in the eye since I was 16. That wasn't going to change today. The door opened again, and the mediator entered, Judge Martha Kelton, retired, efficient, and famously intolerant of melodrama. Perfect. Let's begin, she said, voice brisk. Hollis spoke first, laying out the summary of our claim. Financial contributions, labor over 13 years, exclusion from proceeds, and, most critically, new evidence in the form of handwritten documentation. When he finished, he opened the thick folder I'd handed him and began to slide pages across the table one by one. Transaction records, he said. Home Depot receipts, Venmo logs, bank transfers. My client paid out over $47,000 in materials and maintenance costs over a decade, not including undocumented labor. The next document, emails and text threads in which my client was asked for funds, always framed as temporary help, never as gifts. He paused and turned to me. I nodded. Then came the letter. Hollis pulled it from a plastic sleeve and laid it flat between us and the other side. A scan had already been included in the filing, but seeing the original, yellowed, handwritten, signed in my grandmother's elegant, shaking hand, made the room go quiet. Vera leaned forward slightly, her breath catching. Hollis didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This is a personal letter addressed to Zoe Mayfield, dated September 12, 2014. In it, the late Margaret Mayfield states clearly, "This house is as much yours as it is mine. You've kept it alive when the rest of us only lived in it." He looked up. There is also a notarized will from 2012, separate from the one filed by Ms. Vera Mayfield. It names Zoe as a primary heir to the property. Now Vera spoke, voice thin and high. This wasn't the plan. Hollis didn't blink. It was your plan, just not the legal one. The silence that followed had weight. Bryn finally broke it with a whimper. You're tearing this family apart. I looked at her and spoke for the first time. No, you tore it apart. I just stopped pretending you didn't. Calder shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. His eyes still never met mine. Judge Kelton cleared her throat. I've read the file. I've seen the documents. I don't need to hear any more. She turned to the opposing counsel. Unless you have a material dispute of fact. The lawyer beside my parents, a young man sweating through his collar, shook his head. No, ma'am. Then here is my recommendation. She folded her hands. Immediate stay on the sale of the property. 50% stake is awarded to Miss Zoe Mayfield, to be administered with equal say in any future action regarding the home. Mediation is concluded. Vera's face crumpled slightly. Calder exhaled like someone unplugged him. Bryn said nothing. I stood, slowly collected my papers, and placed them back into the folder. Hollis nodded once, quietly proud. As I reached the door, Vera's voice followed me. We raised you better than this. I didn't turn. No, I said over my shoulder. You raised me quiet. I fixed that. The house sold 3 weeks later. I didn't visit again, but I drove past once, just to see what freedom looked like in bricks. It was early October when I moved into the townhouse. The air carried the sharpness of the season, not cold enough to bite, just crisp enough to remind you change was coming. The building itself wasn't much. 2 stories, a small porch, a patch of lawn that looked like it hadn't been mowed in a while. The walls were beige, the floor scratched, but the locks were mine. I unpacked slowly, box by box, over the course of a weekend. The furniture didn't match. A second-hand sofa, a chipped coffee table, a lamp with a dented shade, none of it mattered. For the first time in my life, I chose where each item went. The mailbox had my name printed clearly, Zoe Mayfield. No one added or dropped a letter. No one edited me. No one else had keys. The first night there, I slept with the windows cracked open. The street below was quiet except for the occasional car passing and the distant bark of a dog. I didn't lock my bedroom door. There was nothing to hide from anymore. 3 voicemails came that first week, all from my mother. The first one was brittle, tight. I hope you're happy. You've embarrassed this family. The second was tearful. We did what we thought was best, Zoe. You never understood how hard it was for us. The third was calm. Too calm. Don't think this makes you right. There are consequences to cutting ties. I didn't delete any of them. I didn't respond either. I archived them in a folder called Echoes. Calder sent an email. Short, measured, in his usual detached tone. You could have handled this differently. I didn't reply, because I had handled it. Bryn posted on social media, a poem of all things. Something vague about betrayal and people who bite the hand that feeds them. Her followers, though fewer now, still offered heart emojis and encouragement. She never said my name. She didn't have to. I watched it all quietly, not out of pettiness, but because part of me needed to understand how far they'd go to avoid reflection. It was easier to paint me as the villain than to face the mirror. One evening, I opened a box I hadn't touched since moving. Inside was the letter, the original, handwritten one from my grandmother. The edges had yellowed more in the weeks since I'd last seen it. The handwriting slanted unevenly, but every word felt carved into permanence. They won't always see you, Zoe, so you build things they can't ignore. I framed it and hung it above my desk. The next day, I took a walk down to the corner store. It wasn't anything fancy, fluorescent lights, faded signage, the same clerk who always looked surprised when someone said thank you. As I grabbed a carton of eggs and a pint of milk, I felt someone tap my arm gently. It was Mrs. Hargrove, my high school English teacher. She looked older, of course, hair grayer, eyes softer. But she still carried herself like a woman who expected people to sit up straight when she entered the room. Zoe, she said, surprised, you look like you've been through fire. I smiled, and came out heat-proof. She nodded, her eyes holding mine for a beat longer than necessary. Good. After she left, I stood in the aisle for a moment, letting the silence settle. I wasn't angry anymore. Not even sad, really. Just lighter. The memories didn't vanish. They didn't need to. I'd stopped needing them to make sense. The things they'd taken, my time, my money, my trust, were never really theirs to own. And the things I kept, they couldn't touch those. I paid at the counter and walked home in the fading light. The trees had started turning, their leaves catching the sun like stained glass. Back at the townhouse, I made dinner, something simple. Sat at the table, ate alone, didn't feel lonely. I glanced at the letter on the wall one last time that evening before turning out the lights. They locked me out, but I didn't lose my home. I rebuilt it, in my name, with keys no one else can copy. Sometimes, the loudest form of justice is delivered in silence, through evidence, patience, and the strength to walk away. Zoe's story is a reminder that being erased doesn't mean being powerless. And family? Family isn't defined by blood, but by respect. Have you ever had to fight for your place in your own family? Tell us your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about